Welcome to the Popish Plot. I'm Nate.
And I'm Jessica.
Today is Monday, and we are going to be bringing you the third part of our Why We're Catholic Book Club book report.
Yes. If you've been following along, every Monday we've been posting a book report on a section of this book, and various other Catholic YouTubers are doing the same thing. Down below in the description, there'll be a link to the playlist of everyone's videos for this section.
Yep, so make sure after you get done watching this episode, you go check them out. This is section 3.
And this is the Church and The Sacraments.
Yep, if you've been watching regularly, you'll know that in part 1, we talked about truth in God. Essentially why there is reason to believe that there is a God.
In part 2, we discussed Jesus in the Bible and how there are reasons to believe that he was a real person, that the resurrection happened, and that the Bible is well researched and historically, proven to have been from the actual time.
And in his progression of moving from more general to more specific topics, we are now getting into more specific stuff. We've moved from why believe in a God at all to why be Christian to now we're starting to work on the why we're Catholic, and
Yes.
that we're going to be discussing the Church, the priests, the Pope, the sacraments.
So, what did you enjoy out of this section?
Well, the thing I get most from it, as I've discussed in previous episodes, in my mindset as a former Protestant convert, I tend to look at it through that kind of a lens. And if you've ever had a discussion about why Protestant churches exist with other people, they generally will start to tend to point out that at some point in time, somewhere after the Great Commission, somewhere after that point, but yet prior to 1530 something,
Yeah.
the church went off the rails. Somewhere in there, we started filtering in traditions of man, and it all just it needed a reformation in order to get back to what it was originally designed to be, which is a whole other episode, some of which I think we already did.
Yes.
But anyways, the thing that I took away from this, and I love reading and listening to Mr. Trent Horn. I like the way he looks at things, the way he talks about things, and the research that he's put into these things. Because he's really looked into the history of the Catholic Church, him being a convert himself, and in many of the in most of these chapters, he's taking things that we know exist today, and he's tracing them back to either just after the New Testament,
Okay.
or having actually been suggested within either the New Testament or prefigured in the Old Testament.
Okay.
So, he not only goes and shows that, no, this isn't something new that we came up with in the 5th century, but in fact, this thing can actually be traced back to, 3rd century BC in the Hebrew temple. Basically showing that many things that we look at as being Christian traditions today were in fact, or at least Catholic traditions today, were in fact essentially a slightly altered form of the way that they did, that the Hebrews of Jesus' time did things. And that he wasn't giving them something completely new, but he was taking the thing that they had that wasn't quite in the way that God had intended it. And much like with the Old Covenant, he didn't change the Old Covenant, he simply completed it.
That is interesting. I totally can see that. I kind of oddly saw how this was actually interesting comparing the Catholic Church to the Orthodox churches.
Okay.
At the same time I was reading this, happened to have a nice internet discussion with someone who was Orthodox, whose main point was that the Pope should not have changed any of the things that the Pope has changed throughout history, such as, what day we have a holiday. They're not even going over, big dogmas or anything.
Just the minutia, the
Yeah.
day-to-day stuff.
Because
All right.
they are the first among equals, which means that they have no more power than anyone else and no power over any other area. And that no church father ever could say anything to the opposite.
But yet they did.
Lots of them did.
Yeah.
And because for the first 1,000 years we were the same church, we agree on who the church fathers are. It's not like, I'm mentioning this person, they're like, yeah, that one wasn't a real one. That was a horrible heretic. They also acknowledge this person. I mean, they may not, saint the same ones, because it was kind of, by public demand back then.
Sure.
So some were more popular in the West, some were, but, this bishop or this person who, St. John was the person who taught. They wrote this. So it points out both some of the things of the early church fathers saying, you have to listen to Peter in cases after Peter died. Things like Peter has spoken through Leo, who was the Pope at the time,
Yep.
in talking to something that wasn't taking place in Rome. It was taking halfway across the known world in under an area that would have been another bishop's main domain.
Yes, in which case, if Peter was merely the first among equals,
Which is
he
just
would
a
have
ridiculous title.
It's such a ridiculous title.
You're all equal, but you are more equaler.
Yes. Everybody's equal, but this one is a little more equal than the rest.
Yes.
But that right there tells me that one is that seems like it would actually support the primacy of Peter, because he's more equal than the rest.
Yes. So it goes over with church fathers why the Pope has his power. Of course, points out the limits to his power. If the Pope gives you who's going to win the Super Bowl, you could flip a coin. You have equal chance of that being right.
Yes.
He's only, in charge of things that are faith and morals.
Yes, and well, yes, because he discussed, I believe, the infallibility.
Yes.
Which is always a fun one, because infallibility doesn't mean that he's always going to be right on everything.
Nor does it mean impeccability. He also sins. In fact, the
Yes.
Pope probably goes to confession more than most of us. Not because he's, extra sinful, but because, it's a lot of work being the Pope.
Look, at the point which you're a Pope, you probably have your own confessor, and at which point, you just, I'd have like a weekly appointment.
I think he does.
I'm just saying, I'd have at least a weekly appointment, just to, not even, it would be more like a spiritual direction kind of a thing. It'd just be a sit down, okay, so here's what's going on.
Yes.
But yeah, no.
And it doesn't just have it under, what the church fathers or early Christians wrote. It does have Bible quotes that explain it, both New Testament and, again, Old Testament.
Yeah.
Because it's pointing out how the role of the Pope was prefigured, both in spiritual and in just logical, everyday, practical, earthly senses of the king is gone, someone has to play the part of in charge for the day-to-day things that needs to get done.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. The royal steward who got keys.
The keys to the gates of the city.
Exactly. That doesn't sound anything at all like the Pope.
Nope.
There are no keys involved.
No keys involved in being the Pope. Come on, there's no locked
Oh,
doors
wait.
at the Vatican.
There was that time, and I think it was Matthew, where Jesus
I hand you
gave
the keys of the kingdom
to Peter, and just Peter.
Yeah.
And there
Anyways.
was a later one about binding and loosing that kind of, has a key analogy, but that was about confessions.
Anyways, to wrap it up, Mr. Trenthorn does an excellent job going and actually showing biblical, historical, and testimonial proof for why the Catholic Church is the way it is, and why it should continue to be so.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't already gone out and gotten yourself a copy, please consider doing so. It's a very good book from Catholic Answers Press.
Mm-hmm. And if you have a copy and you're reading it, go ahead and comment down below with things you found interesting on this chapter. Or if you haven't started reading it yet, comment below with the thing you were most surprised to find out had some historical background. It was in the Bible and you never thought of it, or so forth, about the Catholic faith.
Yeah. And if by some chance you're Mike Wilson and you're watching this, everybody wants to know what you think about it. So feel free to comment that down in the comments below, since you weren't able to be here.
Yes.
And remember to go down while you're at it. Hit the subscribe button and the bell right next to it so you get notified when our next episode comes out. Hit the like button because we don't have hate viewers here at the Popish Plot. At least not yet.
Well, not often.
Not that we're aware of.
I don't know. His mom keeps putting angry faces on our post about the show.
Fair enough. And like we said at the beginning of the episode, go down below and check out the other episodes that have been posted by some of our fellow YouTubers. And until next time, remember, live your faith.
Love your faith.
Share that love.